wants to go up in it.
No, she's gonna. Ella's gonna grab the camera. That's okay. So maybe you can talk about being born in Jersey City.
Okay.
At the bottom?
Good to start there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, back in July the 9th, 1924, I was born in Brooklyn, New York. And 3 days after I was... So therefore, we moved to Jersey City, where my mother originally lived. And we moved in with my grandmother in Jersey City.
And that would be Mama.
That would be, we called her Mama.
Okay.
And then I went to school in Jersey City, to St. Joseph's Grammar School, and I went to All Saints Commercial High School. It was a 2-year commercial high school. I had a brother who graduated from high school the same week I did, but he graduated from a 4-year high school, and I graduated from a 2-year commercial high school.
You guys didn't go to the same school?
No. We
Okay.
went to 2 different Catholic high schools. Mine was only 2 years, and his was 4 years. So then I had a couple of jobs until I went in the Army at the age of 18 on April of 1943. I went in the United States Army.
Before we talk about you going into the Army, what type of jobs did you have before you went in there?
Before I went in the Army, I got out of high school, which was a 2-year commercial high school, and I got a job with the NYA.
Uh-huh.
That's 25 cents an hour, and it means National Youth Association. And you're allowed to work 20 hours a month.
Oh, okay.
25 cents an hour. And that was considered pretty good.
That's not bad. That didn't sound like
And
anything.
then also, while I was in high school, I was an usher in the State Theater in Jersey City.
Ah, that's
The only way I
okay.
got the job as an usher, one of the fellows that quit high school, he said, hey, they're hiring on over in the State Theater. He said, and I'm not working, will you walk over with me? Well, he was a little shorter than I was. So I walked over with him, and the head usher come out, just took the 6 tallest people online. And I was one of them, and I wasn't even looking for a job. That also paid 25 cents an hour. But you had to buy your own bow tie and your own dickie and everything yourself.
Right.
Well, we went inside, and the 6 people were asked, how do you pronounce Theater? And I was the only one that said theater. The rest of them said theater. So I got the job.
Well, okay.
But then from there, between the NYA, and then I worked for Colgate's. Colgate, Palmolive, Pete.
Where did you stand outside the theater and
Well, while I was in
theater.
high school, I told all the girls that I had this job as an usher. And see, my job as an usher, because of my height, it was like a big coat and a big hat on you, like the in front of the hotels, the fellas that
like a bellboy
bellboy,
or a doorman?
doorman.
Okay.
I look like a doorman. And see, I would ask the people online, how many tickets do you want? And they'd say 3 and maybe 1 adult or 2 children or whatever. And I told the girls that I had this job. So they all came Sunday to the State Theater. Just before they got there, they gave me a little pan with a broom, and I was out sweeping the sidewalk when all the girls came. It's about 4 or 6 girls there, and I'm sweeping. Wasn't embarrassing then. But then anyway, I got a job then with Federal Telephone and Radio. No, first on Wall Street. And in Wall Street, a messenger is called a runner, and I was a runner. And I was a runner only maybe about a couple of months when the head runner went on vacation, and they gave me his job as a head runner.
Oh, wow.
But I quit to go with Federal Telephone and Radio to do defense work, and that paid 50 cents an hour. And boy, I could get 2 hours a day overtime, 6 hours on Saturdays at time and a half. I was making like $35 a week, which was big money.
Now this is after you graduated high school.
Yeah, so all this
Okay,
is
this
after
is
I got out
after.
of high school. Well, then I
Okay.
worked there for 9 months, and with that, I was being drafted.
How about
So I
the
took
theater?
my...
Did you say step up close? The theater, what did you say? Step up?
Oh, in the theater, I was online for the people to buy tickets. And I was to say, step up close, have your change ready, and state the number of tickets you wish. Immediate seats on all floors, smoking in the lounge and balcony. Well, that was my little speech. But then, with Federal Telephone and Radio, I was working 56 hours a week. And for that, I was getting $35 an hour. And it was good. And then in April, I took my first physical the early part of April.
April of
1943.
43, okay.
And then I got a letter. Your order to report for induction has been canceled. And I didn't know what it meant. It seems they gave me a deferment from the draft because I was doing defense work. And I refused to accept it. So I went to my draft board and I said, listen, I had the mumps last week. No, I had the measles last week. And I was off last week with the measles. They don't need me. So they canceled my defense, whatever you call it, deferment. They canceled the deferment.
Now, was your brother, was he already in?
My brother was in the Navy by this time.
Okay.
My brother went in the Navy in the September of 42. And then I went in April of 43. And I got down to Fort Dix. And because very few males knew how to type, immediately I was put on special duty for 60 days. Didn't even have basic training yet or nothing. And because I could type, now the typing that you did, you couldn't make overstrike, you couldn't erase. It had to be perfect because you was typing people's service record and their pay book and their medical books.
So when you made a mistake, you just had to start all over?
You threw it away and start all over. So I was delayed 60 days in Fort Dix, New Jersey on special duty. Then I had to go for basic training. And I went to Greensboro, North Carolina for basic training. From Greensboro, North Carolina, after basic training, I went to, it's a part of Fort Monmouth, and it's Camp Wood, New Jersey. And I went to quartermaster school. And I studied to work in an office in the quartermaster. From there, I went to Kearns, Utah to be assigned. From Kearns, Utah, they assigned me to go overseas. And to do that, instead of being out in Utah, I come all the way back to Camp Patrick Henry, Virginia.
Now, how long did that take from when you went to basic training to
April,
all over?
And I boarded ship to go overseas December the 24th, 1943.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I boarded ship, and it was a Liberty ship. And as you get on the ship, you've got your barracks bag, you've got your helmet, you've got your gas mask, you've got all this. And out of a 50-gallon drum, they take a carbine, because Air Force is carbines. We didn't use the big rifle. Air Force uses a carbine. They take this thing out of grease and hand it to you and say, by the time you get overseas, this thing better be clean. And you got this piece of grease hanging there, and your barracks bag, and your gas mask, and everything. Now, you went down in the hull of the ship, and there was 280 men in the hull of the ship. This is Christmas Eve. Christmas Day, you meet the captain of the ship, and he was Greek, and he spoke broken English. And he said, men, this ship is going to go, and that's the first you hear where, we are going to go to Italy. And men, you no need your gas mask on this ship. And you no need your life preserver on this ship. Because we have a cargo of ammunition. If this ship gets hit, we go boom, and it's gone. So during this
that gives you a lot of confidence.
We were on a convoy, and we had battleships on either side of us. We got near the Straits of Gibraltar, and all of a sudden the depth charges start flying, banking. Our ship almost went sideways, and they made us stay in the hull of the ship during this, and we separated from the convoy. Because we had ammunition for a cargo, they took us away from the regular thing. By the time we got into Naples, Italy, at the harbor, most of the Liberty ships were on their side. And we had to get off our ship on a ladder, get onto a ship that was on its side in order to get onto land. Got onto land, and they put you in trucks for a convoy. And a convoy, they must have been doing 70 or 80 miles an hour for fear that we'd be strafed. and they took us to Bari, Italy. Bari, Italy is going to give me my assignment of what quartermaster I'm going to be in. Well, they gave me an assignment, and they sent me to the airport. And they put me on a plane to Sicily. The plane
First time you
had
ever
a
on an
hole in it.
airplane, right?
First time I was ever on an airplane.
Okay.
The runway had a hole in it from the water or something, and the wheels went in a hole. And we had to transfer from one C-47 to another. Now, a C-47 is like a subway train. It's got seats where you face each other, and you're looking across, metal seats they are. And they give you a bucket. In case you have to throw up, you pass the bucket on around. You all take turns throwing up. I got to Sicily, only to find out that the outfit that I'm assigned to is not in Sicily. It's outside Naples in Santa Maria. So I'm in the wrong place. So I stayed overnight for about 2 or 3 nights in Sicily. I got lost in Sicily going to a theater one night. Didn't know the name of the barracks I was supposed to be in and so forth. But anyway, I got back to Santa Maria. And although I was in the quartermaster, we were running an emergency landing field. If the B-17s got hit, they were not to land at their own landing field.
Why?
And damage it.
Oh, okay.
So we had to run in an emergency landing field. So in addition to working in the quartermaster all day, you took turns with guard duty at night. And if you didn't do guard duty there, you did guard duty down in Naples at the post office. And it was not unusual to take a bottle of wine, keeping it inside your jacket, and you drank wine while you were on guard duty to keep you warm, because it was so damp in Naples, you know.
Were you on guard duty all by yourself? Or?
2 hours all by yourself. And you took your rifle, and if the civilians came near the planes, you shot your rifle up in the air to scare them away.
Okay.
And we had air raids, faithfully, right there. And another assignment I had, because I was in the quartermaster, was to go to a quarry and have the prisoners of war chop rocks.
These are the German prisoners of war. Okay.
And you brought the rocks back and you made paths. Well, it turned out that was a bad thing to do. The German planes would come over at night and they could find out where you were when they saw these white paths.
Oh, jeez.
The big job was to pick the paths up then and get rid of the stone. So then, again, because I could type, I got transferred to the headquarters 12th Air Force Service Command. In a regular office in Naples, air raids every single night of the week.
Tell me some of the stories about the air raids, because I love those stories.
Oh, the air raids were so bad at night. And you were told during an air raid, it was like a hotel where we stayed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was up on about the 8th floor. The air raids, the vibration of the bombs was so bad that if you didn't go down to the basement, when the bomb hit, you fell out of your cot sometimes, right onto a marble floor. Because there's no wood in Italy. Everything is brick, marble, and all that stuff. So it wasn't unusual to find yourself on the floor. So for about 9 months in Naples, it was terrible. It really was. So then I was on an advanced echelon to Rome.
Didn't an air raid happen and you woke up the only one there or something?
Yes, on the floor. I woke up one night, I'm on the floor. Everybody ran downstairs during the air raid. I fell out of the cot, I'm still on the floor. They just leave you there, you know. Then I got an advanced echelon to Rome. Now, Rome was an open city, and it was not to be bombed. And it was hit several places. And I could walk to the Vatican. And I had the pleasure of walking to the Vatican one day, and I was with an officer at the time, a captain, and we actually went and shook hands with the Pope. Wow. And the Pope, in perfect English, said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Jersey City, New Jersey." And the Pope spoke different languages according to who he was talking to at the time.
Which Pope was this?
Pope Pius XII. His first name is the same as mine. It's Eugene Pacelli.
Okay.
His name is Eugene Pacelli.
And you got to kiss the ring and that?
I got to kiss his ring.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
So from Rome, I went back to Naples, and then I got transferred to our whole outfit went to Siena, Italy, and that was just beautiful. And World War II, VE Day, was while we were up in Siena, Italy. That meant we're going to get transferred to the Pacific by way of going home for 30 days.
Okay.
But instead of going home for 30 days, which I was in line for, they sent me to headquarters, 12th Air Force, in Florence, Italy, again in the quartermaster. Then, for some reason or other, we had too many men ready to go home and everything, so I got transferred to the historical section of the 12th Air Force, and they made me a buck sergeant. From the historical section, 12th Air Force, around that time, VJ Day came. Now you're in line to be transferred to the United States, and you need so many points to be transferred. Well, by that time, I had a couple of battle stars, which is 5 points apiece, and I had 1 point for every month I was overseas, 1 point for every month I was in the Army. I had more than enough points to be discharged. Instead, I got transferred to a palace in Caserta, and I got into the Mediterranean Army Air Forces. From the Mediterranean Army Air Forces, here I am with enough points to be discharged, but there's too many men all at once ready to go.
Right.
I got transferred to the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. instead of being discharged from the service. At the Pentagon, they gave me one promotion if I'd stay for 6 months, and I turned them down. I had been, by that time I was in the service long enough.
Right.
So they sent me then to where I started in Fort Dix. Fort Dix had too many men at the time to be discharged, so instead they gave me 45 days rest and recuperation. And the 45 days cannot end around Christmas or New Year's. So they added 15 days to it.
Oh,
So
wow.
here I'm home about 2 months, and I got married during that period of time, and
Were you were in New Jersey then?
yep, in New Jersey.
Okay.
And then I got out of the service in January of 1946.
Let me ask you a question. When you were over in Italy and VE Day happened,
Yes.
how did you find out about it?
That was the thing. VE Day and VJ Day, you almost didn't even know it happened. Somebody had to tell you about it.
Was there
No,
celebrations?
there was no
Nothing?
big celebration at all.
Really?
No. You know how you can remember when a certain person, say Kennedy was assassinated or something like that? There was nothing that I could ever recall, VJ Day or VE Day.
Really?
Nothing.
What about like when the invasion of Normandy or anything like that happened?
Well,
Did word like that
Normandy
spread or?
D-Day, Normandy invasion, while I was in Naples, they were transferring people like me into the infantry.
Okay.
My barracks bag went in on the Normandy invasion,
Really?
and I didn't. My stuff went ahead of me, and I had a musette bag that I was living with. All my clothes and all was in a barracks bag, and it went in, and I didn't. I was back in Naples during that period of time.
They just they needed
didn't
you
need
there.
us.
They didn't need.
They
Okay.
They also, because I could type, they were transferring men from the infantry that were Purple Heart.
Hmm.
My replacement showed up, and I was breaking them in.
Oh, so you,
Before that,
Okay.
even, a girl came to replace me. She stayed with me almost 2 years on that job, and she never fully replaced me, and neither did the Purple Heart guy replace me. That's
Wow.
true. Because, see, in other words, that was a very unusual thing to have enough men that could still type. See?
Mhm.
And we not only worked all week and had air raids every night, but one night a week you worked in the telegraph office, taking telegrams all night too. You got very little rest, believe me.
could you
Your number, your serial number.
My Army serial number is 32915586.
you needed that number for everything? I guess.
Everything you need at that number. And the 5586 you put on your clothes, the last 4 numbers.
So that when they washed them,
Yep.
you got to make sure you get your clothes back.
They washed them, you washed.
You washed. Okay.
You know, except in Italy, you could get some of the girls who'd stand around at the hotels. You give them your laundry, and they would do it, if you gave them just a pack of cigarettes, that was a lot. So that we were rationed to 10 packs of cigarettes a week, and they were too valuable to smoke.
Mm-hmm.
You were doing that to get your laundry done. If you went for a haircut, you could get with
Just a pack of cigarettes.
or something.
Wow.
You could send a gift home, pack of cigarettes or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And we were rationed to that. But
Could we go back for just a second? Could you tell me maybe a story or two that you can remember about people, maybe when people first came over from Ireland?
well, in my grandmother's case, she came from a large family in County Clare, Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
And her sister was to come to the United States, but you had to be sponsored. So they had an uncle in New York, and the uncle sponsored my grandmother's sister. But she refused at the last minute. And my grandmother's father woke her up one day and said, "You're going to go to New York on your sister's passage."
It was just that quick.
Just
You're
that's when
going.
my grandmother found out she was going to New York. And she came to New York, and her uncle took care of her for a while.
How old was she when she got here?
She probably was about 16.
16. Okay. Now, didn't she have a couple funny stories about her?
Well,
first getting
her
here?
sister later came to New York.
Okay.
And her sister, as I said, has to be sponsored.
Mm-hmm.
So when her sister came to New York, also she got a job as a maid in Greenwich Village.
Okay.
Well, the people who sponsor you were responsible for you. So they wouldn't let her out the door for the first month even. So after about a month, they said, "Well, let Delia go out."
Uh-huh.
So they gave her a broom, and they told her to sweep the walk. An hour or two later, no Delia. She was still sweeping the walk 3 or 4 blocks away. She was still sweeping because they said sweep the walk.
Right. She just kept going.
And then after a couple of months, they said, "We have to teach Delia public transportation." So they had these open-side trolley cars, and they told Aunt Delia, "Now you get on the trolley car, and we're going to send you up to 14th Street, which was about 10 blocks away. And you watch the numbers going up. 5th Street, 6th Street. When you get to 13th, you ring the buzzer and you get off, because it's an open trolley car on the side." And they gave her a nickel to buy a spool of thread up on 14th Street. Well, Aunt Delia saw 13th Street. She rang the buzzer and got off. No one told her to wait for the trolley car to stop. She broke her arm.
Now, this would be Mama's
sister. Her
Mama's
younger sister. She was 5 years younger than her.
Now, when she was in New York, Mama had already moved to Jersey
Jersey
City.
City and
She
got
already
married.
lived there.
Yeah.
And now, Delia eventually moved over to Jersey City.
No,
or no?
Delia didn't. We visited Delia almost every week.
Okay.
And Delia, when her husband died, by that time my grandmother was dead.
Uh-huh.
And I walked into that funeral home and I got scared. I thought it was my grandmother sitting at the head of that casket. I mean, in life they didn't look the same. But here, when I walked into that funeral parlor, Aunt Delia had a very, very strong Irish accent. And I went over to Aunt Delia, and she's sitting at the head of the casket with her husband, and laying in the casket.
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Oh, Aunt Delia, I'm so sorry. Uncle Tom died." She says, yes, buddy." She says, "If I was younger, I could get another man."
Now, how old do you think she was when that
And
happened?
she was about 80.
She was about 80.
Because
when that-
Mama
wow.
died in 1950 at the age of 83. So this would have been about 85, 86, something
Okay.
like that, yeah. But Aunt Delia kept her Irish accent. My grandmother didn't. My grandmother, you knew she came from Ireland, but she... Also, Aunt Delia went back almost every year. The Considine farm was still in Ireland in those days.
Oh, wow.
And Aunt Delia went back every year almost. My grandmother never went back. She had
Now-
no desire to go back.
So, your mother and Della, they grew up in Jersey City.
Well, yes, every one of them would.
And
grew up
so
in
it was
Jersey.
Aggie and Della and who
The
else?
oldest was Della.
Della, okay.
She was born about 1894.
Okay.
And then came, well, there was one that died before Della. But then Della, then came May, who became a Dominican nun.
Okay.
Then came my mother. Her name would be Margaret Agnes Herman. Then came Katie. Catherine. And then came my Uncle Thomas. And he became a Zavarian brother, and he taught school in Holy Cross, Brooklyn, New York, and later taught school down in Baltimore, Maryland, and the school that Babe Ruth come out of.
I know the school you're talking. What's the school? What school?
Thomas come out of. And that's where he died, down there at the school that Babe Ruth come out of, which was we visited him at that school, and at that time Babe Ruth was pretty famous. He was coming back to the school. This is the early 1930s. Babe Ruth was already famous then.
Oh, wow.
And we did visit that school, and there was no fence around it or anything. In other words, this was a school for boys that got in trouble, and that was your last chance. You went to that school.
That was it.
And if you wanted to leave, you could leave. But then you'd wind up in what we call a parental home or something like that, you know? Yes.
I'm gonna
Oh,
hit
it's St.
pause.
Mary's Industrial School.
St. Mary's, that's right.
Well, so then, when Thomas died, we went down, and he was in the cemetery, and it had about a stone monument with his name on it, and it was about 36 inches high. Eileen and I went back, and they already changed the stone, and now it's a flat stone, a different stone.
Really?
Yeah, in that cemetery. The name of the cemetery at the time was Bonnie Bray, and now the name of the cemetery is Cathedral Cemetery.
This is in Baltimore.
In Baltimore. And Eileen and I did go to the grave, and like I say, they changed the monument even. It's a flat stone with his name on it, whereas I have pictures of the upright stone. And in those pictures, my grandmother was standing at her son's grave, and Aggie, my mother, and Katie, and Connie.
Now, when you just to go back, wait before, when you were growing up in Jersey City, you lived on the top floor of that apartment?
Yeah,
with
we
Aggie?
lived on the top floor of 330 Baldwin Avenue, Jersey City.
Okay.
And we have many pictures of being up on the roof of 330 Baldwin Avenue. In those days, you went up on the roof, and you could socialize up there.
Now, did you have relatives living in the same building, or was it just you living up in?
When we lived across the street in 325 Baldwin Avenue, Katie, Eddie, Connie, and Agnes. Agnes wasn't born yet, but Connie was. We all lived in the same house then.
Oh, wow.
It had to be in the 30s.
Can you want a glass of water, Ryan?
No, go ahead.
Can you talk just for a second about what you remember about the Great Depression?
Yes, the crash of 29, my aunt, Sister Consilia, May, in other words, was down in St. Aidan's Convent in Jersey City during the crash of 29. She was visiting, and we're in the convent, and a nun, she said, "The banks are closed.
Ella.
We're running into depression." And my grandmother said, "Was the Provident Bank in Jersey City closed?" The nun says, "Well, I don't know." And that's where Mama had her money, and that bank never closed.
Really?
The crash of 29, I was in the convent in St. Aidan's in Jersey City.
And so she didn't lose all her money?
She didn't lose a dime, my grandmother. She had her money in the Provident, and that never closed.
She didn't have much money though, right?
Well, in those days, if you had $1,000, it was a lot of money. And I can say for sure Mama had $1,000. And Aggie had $1,000.
That's before Social Security.
Yep, all this is before Social Security. But
Now,
they were never below $1,000, and that was a lot of money then.
did things change from before the stock market crash to after,
Yes,
like, and how you
my mother
lived?
was working 6 days a week. New York Bell Telephone. They put her on 4.5 days a week. Rather than lay people off, they spread the work around.
But she was able to keep her job.
She kept her job, but she was in management.
Okay.
My mother was a service observer. My mother listened in on your phone calls all day to see that you were getting good service. But she only listened in on the calls that were put up to be checked.
Okay.
She didn't just
Randomly go
arbitrarily say,
in,
"I'm
okay.
going to listen to your phone." you had to have a problem. And in order to be a service observer, you had to be a chief operator before that, and you had to be a supervisor before that. So Aggie, by this time, was a chief operator, service observer. So Aggie was in management.
So you were still, Aggie was still able to buy food and all that. It wasn't.
On her salary, 4 of us lived: my grandmother, my brother, and I, and Aggie.
Wow.
Vacations every summer. Catholic
Just
school,
on her
which
salary.
the tuition was free, but you had to pay for your books and so many things in Catholic school.
Right.
We could afford it.
Wow.
And we had food on the table with her 4.5 days a week. It supported the 4 of us. We had insurance that we paid for. We had new clothing for Easter. Christmas was a big thing in my house. Without exaggerating, our gifts that we were getting ready to give to people went from the floor to the ceiling, gift wrapped,
Really?
and most of it from Macy's. Now on that, they all believed in Christmas clubs, and every one of them had a Christmas club. And Christmas was a big thing when I was growing up.
You're only 5 years old, right? The crash.
The crash, I was 5 years old and 29, and I know just where I was and sitting at the time, in the convent, in St. Aidan's Convent in Jersey City.
Wow.
And that's when Aggie went on 4.5 days a week. And Aggie didn't retire until the 60s, and about the middle 60s, Aggie retired, and she was still on 4.5 days a week.
Really?
30 years later.
They just kept it right. Now, how did you start working on the railroad after you got back?
When I come out of the service, I went back to Federal Telephone and Radio, because they had to take you back. That's where I worked when I went in the service. And the department I was working in during the war was we were making bells for the signal corps. Radio with a bell in it. It's a shortwave radio, like with a bell in it. And I was adjusting the bells. That department had closed at the end of the war. And when I went back for one day, you were adjusting springs, and I didn't like it. So I got a job as an investigator in the Jersey City Medical Center. As an investigator, my job then was to find out if you really came from Jersey City and were in a city hospital accepting free care. And with the trick questions that we had, I could ask you different questions and find out you were not a resident of Jersey City.
So if you lived in the city, you got treated for free at the hospital?
Yes. Free. It was Jersey City Medical Center, I understand, is the first city medical center in the United States. I understand it was the first
Really?
free city medical center in the entire United States.
I didn't know that. That's unbelievable.
That thing opened up in the 20s sometime, you know. By the time I went to work there in 1946, when I got out of the Army, I got my meals free. I could walk to work, but the salary was $1,500 a year.
Right.
And $1,500 a year with a pregnant wife wasn't enough money. So during my vacation, I went to the Railroad Unemployment Office, and that's where they recommend there's a vacancy. So they had a vacancy on the Central Railroad of New Jersey, and they had another one with the Hudson Manhattan Tubes, which was now the path.
Okay.
So the Central Railroad vacancy was closer for me to take a bus down there to find out what that was all about. And they offered me a relief clerk's job. 6 days a week. You worked 4 to 12 Saturday, days Sunday, back Sunday night for Monday, back Monday night for Tuesday. You're off Wednesday, and days Thursday and Friday. You worked 3 shifts in the 6 days.
Oh, wow.
And it was paying $42 a week. And I figured that's pretty good. The very first payday, I found out they took 96 cents a day off me because I had never worked on the railroad before. And they deducted 96 cents a day.
Really?
So one of the big bosses called me in one day and he said, "Gene, why are they taking this 96 cents a day off you?" And I told him. He says, "I don't think that's right." He says, "Didn't you work in an office before this?" And I said, "Well, in the Army, 2 years in Italy, in the quartermaster office."
Right.
He said, I don't think they should do this. He said, can you prove that? I said, sure. So I had the railroad write to the lieutenant who I worked under in Italy. And all I knew for an address was that he originally worked for Swift and Company. So they wrote a letter to this guy, Mr. Dodgen, Swift and Company, and he got the letter. And
Really?
he wrote to the railroad, and he said, yeah, that man worked for me, and he had 12 men under his jurisdiction, and he worked for me almost 2 years. Immediately, they stopped taking the 96 cents a day off me, and through the union, I tried to get the 96 cents a day back.
Did you get it back?
Never got a nickel back. They said to me, you should be glad you're working instead of looking for more money.
Now, you started out as a clerk.
A relief clerk. Well,
When you retired, what were you?
Well, from being a relief clerk, I became a chief clerk.
Okay.
From a chief clerk, I became an assistant train master. From assistant train master, I became a train master. From train master, in the interim, I got bumped out of everything. And I wound up in the yards as a checker and became a yard master.
Okay.
From a yard master, I went back as a chief clerk. From a chief clerk, I went as an assistant train master. I became then a train master. Then I became an assistant to the superintendent. And then I became the assistant superintendent. And by that time, I was in my 50s. And they had a vacancy for superintendent that I could have taken. Matter of fact, they asked me to get a superintendent for them. I was already too old. I didn't want no part of it. So then Conrail took over. So I was an assistant superintendent, and they had 6 different assistant superintendents because it was 6 different railroads. So they weren't too sure what to do with me. So they made me a trial officer. And as a trial officer, I had all the railroads in the entire Northeast corridor. And if anyone did something wrong, or if you got injured, I held a hearing to find out if you were at fault. And I had from Elizabeth, New Jersey, to Bridgeton, New Jersey, to Philadelphia, and north going up to Kingston, and I had Penn Station, New York City, and Philadelphia, Penn Station, Philadelphia. I had the entire Northeast corridor. I was the only hearing officer on Conrail at the Northeast corridor.
Wow.
And that's how I pensioned off. I was with Conrail 5 years.
And that's how you retired.
That's when I retired at the age of 57. Got married a couple months before that, thinking Eileen had money. And I was broken down and out, and then I went and kicked the headstone of where her husband's buried.
I'm going to push pause here for just...
This was when I was about to be discharged. And because I was a sergeant, they put you on in charge of prisoners of war. And I was in Fort Dix, and they gave me 6 prisoners of war, German prisoners, to go collect the garbage. And of course, I didn't know the route, and even the driver was a prisoner of war of the truck. So up on the back of the truck, and I've got the driver a prisoner of war, and I've got 5 guys that are prisoners of war, and they knew where to pick up the barrels. Like they'd run in back of a mess hall and get 2 barrels, or they'd go on the side. So finally, one day, if a prisoner of war goes AWOL, you have to serve their time. It's very, very strict.
Really?
If you are a guard of a prisoner of war. And me being a buck sergeant, I had 6 of them. Not thinking, I'm up on top of the garbage truck one day, and I decide to find out where 2 of them went, because they ran in back of a mess hall. And when I went to climb off the truck, I handed my rifle to one of the prisoners of war to hold for me while I jumped down. Not thinking. I had like this, But talking about that, while I was waiting to come out of Italy, we had Italian prisoners of war, and we had German prisoners of war. Now the problem there was, we had nothing for them to do. And again, I was on guard duty waiting for a ship to come home. If you told a German prisoner of war to dig a hole, fine, he would dig it. That afternoon, if you told him to cover it, fill it in, he may go AWOL on you. You don't fool around with those people. But if you told an Italian prisoner of war to dig a hole, in almost English, he would say, no, no, no. That's not what I do for a living. They always wanted to do just what they were trained for. If you asked them to mix cement, if that's what they were trained for, but if you asked them to finish the cement, no. I'm a finisher. I know do that.
Really?
You had a little bit of problem there where you could only give an Italian prisoner of war what they thought they were qualified for before the war. A German prisoner of war would adapt themselves. They couldn't wait to get back to Germany, those people, you know? And they kept their barracks beautiful. The German prisoner of war, they would do different things to make it comfortable for themselves, as opposed to the Italian prisoners of war. They wanted you to do for them. And we were almost the enemy with them. It was a shame. Even though, you know, I went over there and I arrived over there in 44. They didn't think that we liberated them at all. It was not unusual to go out at night and them throw a hand grenade towards you.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know it was that bad.
I didn't know it was like that either.
Us that much.
What, because of Mussolini?
See, in other words, yeah, they had Mussolini, see, and they didn't think that we really were that good to them. You know? And by the way, when I was in Italy, I was there for the eruption of Vesuvius.
Wow.
And I was on my way, on my day off to Pompeii, and I stopped off and I picked up lather that had come down from the eruption of Vesuvius.
Wow.
Black lather I picked up in my hand. And that day I went to Pompeii. I went to the ruins of Pompeii.
Really?
I had a, you know, because I was a buck sergeant and all that, I could get away with a little bit of relaxation here or there, you know. And I got to meet civilians in North Italy, which was very, very nice. Most of the civilians I met in North Italy never migrated to this country. They're tall. They're not like the Italian people that we normally see in this country. They're tall. The girls are blonde-headed and so forth.
Really?
And I got to know people up in Siena, and I loved Siena very much. And I got to know civilians up there, you know.
Now, Poppy, on a non-war related note, I have a couple questions for you.
Yes.
Now, as you know, I have a daughter, Ella,
Yes, that's right.
and you had a daughter, have a
Diane.
daughter, Diane. What advice can you give me
Well,
Oh, yeah, tell
about
the story about that.
having a daughter? Can you tell me a couple stories
yes,
about having a daughter?
Diane was on the, she tried to be on the wild side.
Okay.
So, for instance, one night, she was only in fourth year high school, and a fella came to pick her up. And he was a big guy, and he was already out of high school, see? And I warned this fella, you have Diane home here by 11 o'clock tonight or else. And he listened to me. And they went out the front door, and it was a little winter, and it was a little icy, and he fell down the stairs. And she left. She was that tight. Well, that same night at 11 o'clock at night, a knock comes on the door,
Ella.
and it's this fella.
Ella.
And I said, where's Diane? And he said, she didn't want to come home. Where is she? She's down the bowling alley. That's the way Diane was. I tried to be strict with her, but she relaxed the rules quite a bit. We went on vacation with her. Bobby could tell you this. And she told us the first day of high school was going to be September so-and-so. And we believed her. And she was going to go to public high school. We come home that day so she could go to high school the next day. But high school opened up that day. That we'd just come home. She was a day late going to high school the first day. She gave us the wrong date of when the first day of high school was.
I never heard that story before.
Yes. Oh, she was a bit of a problem here or there, you know.
Can you give me any advice? Yeah.
You're in trouble.
Am I just in big trouble?
I think the best advice is to watch the company that they keep.
Okay.
I really think that that's the best, because from time to time she had girlfriends that were straight, and she wasn't as friendly with them as she was with the other type. She was always attracted to the ones that were different.
Right.
Oddballs.
So be careful.
I think the company that they keep has a lot to do with it.
You know, I think that's true for Ella. So let me just pan the camera around. Here's the company she's keeping.
Well, you got that pointed at your father, and he kept in with some real nice. He had some real nice friends. He never hung out with gangs at all. He had no part of gangs, and he always had
I heard my dad hung out with a pretty mean math club.
no, not necessarily, but he hung out with usually one fella at a time, and we always knew their parents and things like that. And he was very selective about his friends.
Can you tell me any funny stories about my dad when he was little?
Well, yeah, when I was first driving, back about 1948, and he was 2 years old, I stopped at a red light on a main thoroughfare, we call it the back highway, and he said to me, "Go ahead, Dad," and I took off, and with that the cops come after me. I said, "Where are you going?" I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "You just went through a red light." I said, "He said it was okay." And I pointed to my son, Bobby. And the cop let me go. He thought it was so funny. He says, "Go ahead, Dad." Off we went.
Oh, jeez. You know, while I have you here, just to get a little history, because I live in Hazlitt,
Yes.
right there. I grew up in Middletown my whole life. Can you tell me the story of why you went from Jersey City to Compton Avenue, or that whole moving down to that area?
Because it was the end of World War II, you could not rent an apartment at all when I got out of the Army.
There were
Soon
just
as
too many
Bobby
people
was
renting, or
born,
what?
I applied for veterans housing, and you would get preference, especially if you had a child, for veterans housing.
Uh-huh.
Well, they didn't come through with anything for me, and the only place I could find to rent was what had been the duplex summer bungalow. And the man I rented it off of, it was in East Keansburg on Navasink Avenue, he filled it in underneath,
Uh-huh.
and he put a wickless stove in the kitchen. A wickless stove is where the fuel keeps just dropping in a pan and lights each time, and there's no wick.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, it sounds real. That's
For
good.
that was in the kitchen. So for Bobby, who had a little bit of a bedroom, we got a space heater, a kerosene space heater. Well, in those days, you couldn't even get kerosene so easy. So when the man would come to deliver the kerosene, if he thought you had a couple of gallons on hand, he'd go someplace else. So I was taking the kerosene when it came and pouring it into Clorox bottles, No Worry bottles, and different, so that they would think it was the
Right.
cleaning fluid. And here, one night I come home from work, and in Bobby's room there was this space heater, and I took one of the No Worry bottles or Clorox,
I see
whatever
where
it
this
was,
is
and
going.
thought that it was kerosene, and I poured it in to fill the space heater, and it flared up in the air, and the wick, that had a wick on it, the wick burned so much, and there's black soot all over the bedroom. He lost his eyelashes. He was black inside the ears, up his nose, and everything else. He was black.
It never
It was
affected me at
so.
all. I've never, no after effects.
Yeah.
Opened the
that's-
window.
I know.
I opened the window and threw the heater out the window. I didn't know what to do with it.
Have you sent away?
Yeah, I threw it right out the window. He was black all over.
Well, his eyelashes grew back and everything. It's fine.
And the other silly incident
How old
like
was
that
he?
was we took Kenneth.
How old was I?
Let's see, we moved. You were born in December. We moved down there in September. You would have been a year. You weren't quite a year yet. This
Now,
would be November.
This isn't Compton Avenue though. This is
November.
before Compton Avenue.
This is in Navasink Avenue.
Across the Port Monmouth Road, across that,
Okay.
toward the beach.
Okay.
An ideal beach.
You would have been 11 months old. It would be in November before Christmas.
And you're giving no organic milk.
You're still alive?
What is she doing?
What?
Well, we could even tell you a story like that about Kenneth. Kenneth was ice skating, and how old would you say Kenneth was that day in
I don't know.
Homedale or someplace we were? Where were we?
Shadow Lake.
Shadow Lake, and he's on the ice skates, and he fell right through the ice.
Oh, wow.
And there's no Kenneth. He fell right through the ice, no Kenneth. And the kids from
jeez.
Christian Brother High School jumped in and pulled Kenneth out. Well, Kenneth was black His eyes, up his nose, in his ears, and everything.
Oh wow.
Wow.
And we didn't know what to take him to the hospital or where.
Got mud in his mouth and his eyes.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
So we took him to a McDonald's and got him a hot chocolate instead of going to the hospital.
You know, this is starting to explain.
Go for the hot chocolate. For the, I don't think you got a hot chocolate that day.
You know,
because I couldn't afford
Dad
two
gets
of them.
blown up. Kenneth gets dry. Falls through the ice. It's starting to explain a lot. I'm wondering what happened to me when I was little.
Well, like, we were minding my cousin Connie, and she had keys, and she put the keys in the electrical
Oh,
receptacle,
jeez.
and it burned, and a piece of the key come off. Yes,
Wow.
my cousin Connie. Yeah,
But you
we were
wouldn't tell her
babysitting
father.
for her.
You wouldn't tell her father, Eddie.
Oh, we wouldn't tell her father. That's like the time Connie fell and she had a lump in her head, and we put a $50 on it. We held the lump down in case her
Isn't that
father
what
come
the
in.
boxers do?
That's what they do with the boxers. Yeah.
Or Kenneth. My Kenneth was on a sled, and he's in Homedale Park up on the hill. He come down on the sled and he hit a tree. So I walk all the way up the hill to him, and his ankle is terrible. And now I don't know how am I going to get him to the foot of the hill. I put him on the sled and pushed him, and he went down.
In another tree.
It wasn't until the
No.
next day that we took him to Riverview Hospital. You wait a day to find out if
Yeah,
it's really
just to see.
bad, you know?
Didn't he ride down on your back one
Oh,
day?
that was in Atlantic Highlands. What happened? We had the one sled, and there's three of us.
Cow's
There's
pasture.
you,
Cow's pasture.
and it's you, and what's his friend's name?
Joey.
Joey, and they were on my back.
The cow's
One
pasture in
sled.
Middletown.
Yeah, down looked like this. When I got down, there was no sled. The buttons went off my jacket. I went down on nothing, and the sled's still back there, and I got two kids on my back. They went on back of me, you know, and no sled. When I landed, there's no sled, and I had no buttons. I went all the way down on just my jacket. And two kids on my back.
And then when
Unbelievable.
you guys said, do it again.
Yeah, that.
Yeah. Oh, God.
How old was Dad when you moved to Compton Avenue?
Let's say 1951, he would be 5.
Okay, so
And the very first thing that come out of the moving truck was his 3-wheel bicycle.
he always likes his
He
bicycles.
loved his bicycle.
He has 7 of them on the back porch here.
Well, my mother bought him the first bicycle, which was a little larger than a kiddie car.
Uh-huh.
And that's one thing about my mother. She was very, very particular about a first bicycle for a boy or a girl. She made sure that if somebody stood on the back of the bike, like when you're 2 and 3 years old,
Uh-huh.
that the bike didn't tip.
So,
Really?
If she bought you a bike, it was going to be a
It was a
good
good bike.
If she bought you a sled, it was going to be a good sled. There was going to be no accident as a result of what she bought you.
Uh-huh.
So his first bicycle, which was a little 3-wheel bike, you could stand somebody on the back of it and he could give them a ride.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she had a good, but then his next tricycle, like the 3-wheel drives, was a second-hand one that he got off of a cousin.
So how long did you live there on Compton Avenue for?
We lived there from 1951 until 1957.
And then you moved to Carr
Then we
Avenue.
went to Carr Avenue. And then Kenneth was born in 58.
Okay.
And then we stayed in Carr Avenue till the early
What year was Diane
1970s.
born?
Diane was born in 52 on
52,
Compton
okay.
Avenue.
Okay. And I was born in 58. Okay, wow.
Now in Compton Avenue, you'll have to understand that's the only thing we could afford. You couldn't rent nothing in Jersey City, and I was in veterans housing by then.
How come you couldn't rent anything in Jersey
There
City?
was never a vacancy. You know,
Really?
at the end of World War II, see, people moved down from Pennsylvania and places like that during the war for defense work.
Uh-huh.
And there was never a vacancy for an apartment.
Oh, wow.
So in Compton Avenue, it was a 3-room house for $5,000. And that's all you got was 3 rooms.
Wow.
And you had a space heater in the floor, a floor heater, that's all. They sold you the house with shelves in the kitchen and no doors over the shelves.
Really?
It was just the bare minimum, this 3-room house. And an expansion attic. All you had was a catwalk up in the attic. So we bought this house for $5,000, and then I paid about $300 for a shed dormer. That in the construction of the house, you got a shed dormer. Well, that was a separate loan.
Uh-huh.
Then somebody came along and said, do you want insulation? I paid another loan for insulation in the house. Then I had a loan for the washing machine, for the living room set, the bedroom set, and I had Bobby. Immediately, we needed a room for him.
Right.
Because it was only 3 rooms downstairs. So I put a flooring in, a tongue and groove floor. Now, I didn't know what I was doing. And I couldn't afford to buy a level. I put a floor in,
With no level.
no level. I put the walls up with no level.
Really?
Put 2 rooms in the attic in a period of 5 years. One for Bobby and one for Diane. Never could afford a level. I couldn't afford new 2x4s.
Was this like it was a walk-up attic? You just walk up, or?
No, it had a set of stairs going
Okay.
up.
Okay.
But then only a catwalk when you got up there. And for electric, we just had from the light downstairs, you ran a cable. And that's the only electric I had upstairs.
That was
And no
the only-
bathroom up there, of course.
Right,
you know.
right.
And we managed, and we had that house for 5 years.
Wow.
And I sold it for a couple of $1,000s more than I paid for it. And by that time, I had paid quite a bit off on the mortgage, too.
Uh-huh.
And I had finished all the loans. The loan for the washing machine, the loan for the shed dormer, the loan for the insulation, the loans for the furniture, and a new car. Brand new 1950 car. And while I was there, I bought a brand new 1955 Chevy.
Wow.
And I was only a clerk, you know, in those days. But I took all the overtime I could get.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the overtime is never an hour or two. It's another 8 hours. You're taking someone's place.
Really?
So, if
You have to work
worked
the whole thing.
8 to 4 and 4 to 12, you got home about 3 o'clock in the morning, and you run the train at 6 o'clock to go back again. 6:17 train in the morning. Did that many a time. He'll tell you that. You could only double as a clerk. You couldn't get 2 hours overtime or something.
Wow.
It's another 8 hours, anything. And I'd come home on what we call the owl, the last train at night. And I'd get home 3:30 in the morning and sitting on the train at 6:17 on the way up again. Did that many a time. Every chance I got.
I would have just slept
But
in the
we
office.
always went on vacation every summer and everything, you know. Oh, the good girl is going to bed. Oh, the good. Mwah. Big kiss. Oh,
big kiss for
thank you so
Poppy.
much for that kiss. Thank you so
Want to
much.
touch his head?
Yay!
How about the daddy? Daddy doesn't get a kiss. Daddy doesn't get a kiss. Give daddy.
I was
Oh,
gonna
I
go
was
to the
touching
bathroom.
daddy's head too. Thank you, Ella.
Now, one of the things that, you know, I got married to Eileen in November the 21st in 1981. And being a sport that I am, we borrow somebody's Playboy card. And we went to Atlantic City for our honeymoon, which would be for one night. And we checked in as Mr. and Mrs. Brzezinski because that's the Playboy card that I borrowed.
First night you're married.
One night, and we checked in Mr. and Mrs. Brzezinski.
Oh, geez.
Because I had to be to work, you know what I mean? After all. And I checked in on someone else's name even. And we were married.
Oh boy. I'm gonna hit pause. I guess you want to talk a little bit about your family, about maybe your parents and where you grew up and everything, or?
Well, I always say, you know, people talk about families and things that you have and don't have. And I always said, when I was growing up, we never had very much money. My father drove a taxi cab during the Depression, and he made a living. But that was just it, a living. Lived in a poor section of the township. Not a bad section, but poor. Everybody was poor. I never felt poor because everybody else was poor. But I know when I used to talk to Ann Anthony's husband, Doc Berg, he grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth. And I used to tell him the same thing. I grew up poor, but I said, I feel I had a good childhood because there was love in the house. And I think that is the most important thing, to have love in the house. I can remember I went to a grammar school that was more like your St. Catherine's.
Uh huh.
Not a Catholic school, but public school. But they had grades 1 through 6, one of each, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I can remember every winter, my mother would make a big pot of vegetable soup. And she'd invite the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade teacher over for lunch for her homemade vegetable soup. And they always looked forward to it.
Oh wow.
And I loved my 4th grade teacher. And then I went to the Township Junior High School. And
Where was this?
Upper Darby.
Okay.
But I lived in a little town called Fernwood, which was one of the towns. It's like Woodbridge Township. It's got Carteret and Court
Okay.
Reading and everything. And I got in with people that were a little more affluent than I was.
Mm-hmm.
Not bragging, but they had graded classes. Now, the junior high had like 20 7th grades. And it went from 1 up to 20. And you were graded like 7-1 was supposed to be the brightest kids and so forth. And I was in 7-3. So I lost all my friends from the town I was in, really. And I was in with new friends, which was a little hard for me because they came from homes that had baby grand pianos.
Oh wow. Okay.
But I made out all right. It was a good education out there. Then my father had changed jobs, and we came into Philadelphia to live. And it was a suburb in Philadelphia that we lived, which was a nice section. And that's where I met she that is Betty Hurley today,
Oh okay.
going to high school. So
All the
I
way
met
back. Really?
back
You've known her that long?
We were 15 years old, going to school one day, and we met one another, and we've been friends all those years.
Oh wow.
So,
Now you didn't have any brothers or sisters?
nope, an only child.
Okay.
That's a horrible thing. I always said I wished I had brothers and sisters, but that's the way. And
And did now? I always knew Grandma as Grandma Florence.
right,
She didn't work.
no.
Or no? Okay.
There was one period of time, I think things got a little bit tight with money, and she went to work as a, I guess you would say a nanny, and the woman and man were both professors at the University of Penn, and she worked there, and then she got a strep throat,
Oh okay.
and she was sick, and she never went back. They thought, because my mother was essentially a housekeeper. Now, Aggie was the type that she liked her Florida vacation and her Ocean Grove vacation, and living in one room didn't bother her at all. My mother, she had to have some place to live. And before she died, when she was in the nursing home, she said, I bet my little house misses me. The house in Pentel really meant so much to her. But she was a homemaker. That was her life.
Uh-huh.
I mean, so, and yet it's funny, my mother was good. She made all kinds of yummy things and sewed my clothes, and I appreciated her. But my father was the fun person.
Really?
My father was the one that would sit down with me at night and read the funny pictures to me. Comes 4th of July, he was the one that would take me out and shoot off fireworks in the street, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He was a fun person, but she was the one that made a good home, really.
Oh wow. Now, when you graduated high school from that area?
I graduated in Philadelphia.
From Philadelphia, okay.
Germantown High was a section in Philadelphia.
So what did you do after high school?
I went to work for about 10 months. I worked for Bell Telephone of Pennsylvania
Okay.
in their payroll department. And I didn't like it. It was operating a payroll machine, and that bored me to death. I needed something that I could have a little more thought behind it than pushing buttons on a machine.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother and dad had friends, and man worked for a payroll outfit, and one of his clients was looking for a girl, and he told me about it. So I went to work there, and that was Hercules Cement. And I worked there until, well, I worked there for a little while after I was first married, too. And then my first husband was the type, you know, man will support his family, so I gave up the job. But I would get bored. Didn't have anything, and I worked with a gal. We had an apartment on the first floor, and the girl on the second floor was manager of a lingerie store. And she needed help at Christmas. I said, "Oh, Raylene, can I work for you?" So I went in there, and they were so satisfied. She had to go to the hospital. They had me back, and I enjoyed that. And then I worked in Sturbridge and Clothier department store for a little while. And then my husband got the job up in Raritan Arsenal in Jersey, and we moved up there. Well, then I didn't work again until Rick was a senior in high school. And that's when I went to work for, well, it was Woodbridge Warehouse at the time. And they were building a new office building and warehouse, both. And I went there with them to Metuchen. And in the meantime, my first husband died. And where I was working, they were going to move to New North Brunswick, which was a longer drive for me. And I thought, this is ridiculous. So I started looking for a job, and I took into consideration how long would take me to drive to work, and all these little bits. And lo and behold, I got the job at Linden Warehouse. And I stayed there until after Poppie and I got married. And I probably would have gone on work, but he was real smart. Poppie says to me,
Wait a minute, Poppie was real smart?
Oh, sure. About my working is, well, you can do what you want to do, but I really didn't retire and get married to be all alone. So I gave up my job, but I had worked that time, I think about, I don't know how many years, well over 10 years, I guess.
Oh, wow.
I was ready to throw in the towel anyway.
Do you remember we were on the phone talking maybe 6 months ago, probably a year ago now, actually, and you were telling me about when you were little, you used to go up to, was it Massachusetts?
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. Can you talk about that for just a little bit?
Well, I can remember that. They were happy times. My father's family they came over into this country in 1620. They were one of the original, they didn't come over on the Plymouth and the Mayflower, but they were. And there's quite a history. At one time I thought I would like to follow through the history of the Dearborn family. And there were a lot of relatives up there. And there was I don't know if she was a distant cousin or to my father. I don't know exactly how it was. But Aunt Abby had this farm with 100 acres. And it was an old-fashioned farmhouse, the outhouse, the well, the barn, but it was no longer an operating farm. So when she died, she left it to my grandfather and his heirs forever and ever, presumably. So my aunt used to go up there for the summer. And then we always vacationed up there. And I loved it up there. It was so different from being in the city in the wide open spaces. I can remember one year my aunt was up there with my cousin, and we would go into the barn. They had somebody they were selling the hay to, and they had the barn filled with hay, and we used to jump from the rafters into the hay, you know. That was fun, and I lost my shoe. And we hunted through the hay, but nowhere did we ever find my shoe. So when they took the hay out in the fall, I don't know, whenever they took it out, They found my shoe finally.
Did they
But-
send it back to you, or
I don't remember. I may have outgrown it by then. I don't remember.
did they have horses and animals and stuff on the farm? Or?
No, no.
Okay.
They did at one time. But practically everybody in this Milton Mills was related to the Dearborns in some way. And I don't know if it was with you when I went up there or if it was Ruth and I had gone up. And I couldn't find the farm again. So I went into the post office in the farm lay between Milton Mills and Sanbornville.
Uh-huh.
And I went up and I went in the post office. And I said, I can't find it, but it was in my father's family. It's the Dearborn farm on Jug Hill. That was the only thing they sent me right to it from the post office, and nobody had really lived there for many years.
Really?
So
Was the house still there?
The will had been broken eventually, which is just as well because there were 4. From the next generation, there were 4. That means the farm would have gone into 4 parts.
Uh-huh.
But the one daughter out of the 4 had 8 children. So by the time it got to Rick's generation, you can imagine how many people would have owned the farm.
Right, right.
So they did break it and they sold it. And the new people were very nice. I think it was with you that we went through the house. The first time I went up there, there was nobody there. But they took us all through the house.
Was it as you remembered it, or?
Yes, they didn't. They modernized. They had the water in with spigots, and they had put a pool in the back. But what fascinated me, and I had to walk up there. They had a family cemetery,
Oh, wow, okay.
and I went there and I took pictures of a lot of the headstones for family purposes.
Uh-huh.
And
So it's all the Dearborn family was buried there?
well,
or?
they weren't Dearborns. It really came. I don't know if it came. It came from the Dearborn side of the family. But they branched out. Were married to different. If I were up there in Boston, following going through the family tree would have been easy, because if I had gone to the genealogical section in Boston, they would have had all this information.
Really?
But I have quite a bit that I've given to Rick.
Mm-hmm.
Had a letter from an uncle and my grandmother, and her sister came from Fitzwilliam, Massachusetts.
Uh-huh.
So on my father's side, my heritage really is New England. My mother, we were never quite sure. Hers went back, but we weren't sure where it came from.
Oh, wow.
But I had many fun times going up to New England. And even today, I'd rather go to the mountains than I would the beach.
Because you had a lot of good times there.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, who would you go there when you went to the farm? Would you just go there with your parents, or?
Yes, yes. And sometimes my parents had friends that liked it up there. Esther and Lou Graham. And my father would drive them up. They would go up. And then my aunt would take my grandmother and go up and spend the summer. Now, whether she was pulling a fast one or not, I don't know. But she used to, as soon as school stopped, my aunt took my cousin and they headed for the farm. She said she couldn't breathe. She had a bad heart. Now, I don't know whether it does or whether she
Right.
just wanted to go away for the summer. But she would go for the whole summer.
Oh, wow.
So she was always up there, and my grandmother until she died.
And you
Wow.
want to tell after we went up there, that the priest lived, and he wasn't there the day we were there. The first time we went up there without your mother.
Oh,
A priest had the place.
yes, yes.
That wasn't anybody that you knew, though, or anything
No,
like that?
But,
But they had a long. Now you see, from what Kenneth tells me so much with his place, it brings back memories of the farm because this place had a long lane, and there was a house at the foot of the lane that a cousin lived in. And you went up and you made the curve right around in front of the place. Sometime when you're you're ready to go home this time. But if you think another time you're down there, still have some pictures of the place up there.
Really?
To show you. Yeah.
Then we took our mother up there. Go ahead about your
Yeah,
mother.
that was the time that they had the pool and everything. And that was the time somebody had done the painting too. Oh, I would have given my eye teeth to have the painting of the farm. Somebody had the place painted. But it was a typical old New England, where you had your main house, your little connection, your woodshed,
Mm-hmm.
and then the outer shed with the outhouse, and the hurricane. I don't know when it was. 36. There was a hurricane that went up through New England, and it took the barn. But
So when you went up there, somebody had painted the farmhouse, and the painting was hanging in the farmhouse.
yeah.
Wow.
But I had a lot of good memories there. My father
Flooring
always
was about a foot wide. The
yeah.
floors about a foot wide.
It
The
was
wood.
that
My
type
father
of
always
plank.
said it would have been great if he had, say, worked in Boston, that you could go up there for weekends, because my father was handy, and he would have kept the place in good shape.
Right.
But it was a long distance from Philadelphia, especially in those days. In those days, when I was a little girl, you didn't even make the trip up there in a day. Or if you did, it was a long trip.
Wow.
You went through Jersey City to get there, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you don't have like all the major highways and stuff.
Philadelphia
The Pulaski
through Jersey
Highway,
City.
the
Through
ferry
Jersey City.
across.
To get there.
The bridges weren't there.
Wow.
That's been a long time ago, Gene.
Did you?
Her mother, when we brought her up there once, she wanted to go up to the attic even to look
Yeah, we
at some of
wouldn't
the
let her
stuff.
go.
We wouldn't let her go up there.
Well, that was like winding staircase to get up there. And my cousin and I, they had, through one section from the main house to the one next section, there was a, like a hallway through it. But it was used for storage more than anything. But it was kind of creepy walking through there from one section
Really?
to the other. Yeah. And my cousin was 4 years older than I was. And he loved to scare the heck out of me, you know. But we found old-fashioned dresses up there. We dressed up one year. And there was
Well, it's been in the family for so long. There must have been some really old things that people
there
put
was
up there from
pictures
way
for
back.
old
Yeah.
and everything, yeah.
Wow.
The cemetery was about as big as this whole apartment. Just a family cemetery. And we were told
They
that,
told us this last time.
yeah,
The town, Sanbornville, had taken it over, and they had somebody come out and cut grass and took care of it. Because there really was nobody left from the family to take care of it anymore.
So is the farm all broken up now?
No. Apparently, Tom, it looks as if maybe they have sold part of it. Because there's another house at the foot of the lane now.
Mm-hmm.
And that all belonged to the Dearborn farm at one time. In fact, if you went way back in the farm, to the edge of the property, it bordered on a farm that belonged to a cousin, Cordis Woolley, and you talked about animals. He, in his place, farmed.
That was still an operating farm.
That was still an operating farm. Because my father, we were up there one year, and we drove up there, and I think my father and, I don't know who he was with, got a little bit tipsy on cider that Cordis had put up, hard cider. But you're bringing back memories that I haven't thought of for a long time.
Well, I don't want to keep you guys here too long,
Yeah.
but before you go, I guess maybe I'll give you a chance to think about it. I'll ask Poppy first. I know we talked a lot on camera here already. Can you think of maybe one memory of you growing up? Maybe a story that you... I have my kids in class do an assignment where there's a... Let me turn this... Okay.
when I was in the 8th grade in school, we had a sister of charity, and we called her Lemon Puss. because she would lose her voice while she was teaching, and she
Uh-huh.
would suck on a lemon to get her voice back.
Oh, wow.
And we called her Lemon Puss. And she was very, very strict. And
Do you remember her name? Her real
Sister
name?
Claire Marie. And that during the 8th grade, one of the girls in our class died, and her name was Genevieve Callahan.
Mm-hmm.
And being an altar boy, and because of my height, again, I led the procession up to in church for her funeral service. I held the cross, which is, they always pick the tallest boy for the cross. So we went back to class after this funeral service, and Sister Claire Marie said, "Well, you wonder why I can get up here and teach this afternoon after just burying Genevieve, but this is my job as a sister of charity." Well, that went over my head.
Mm.
But towards the end of the 8th grade, we got a boy in our class by the name of Alexander Lewandowski. And he had been in Poland, and he got out of Poland on a bicycle and got to the United States. And he didn't speak a word of English. And he was in our 8th grade class with us. And
Oh, wow.
Sister Claire Marie had no trouble with him at all. She would give him an arithmetic assignment and so forth to do. And she'd bow her head yes or no. So I sort of got a pretty good impression of her. But all of a sudden, it's the end of the school year, and we're going into World War II, and she's getting you ready for it. And she told you, we are going to go into World War II. And let me tell you, she said, I am a sister of charity, and I have all I can do to get you people ready from a religious part of this. But my brother is a career army man. And between my brother and I, we're doing the best we can for you kids. Well, I never forgot Sister Claire Marie, because I was over in Italy during air raids, and I would think of her. She got us ready for World War II. But on a happy note,
That's a
when
great
I went to
story.
high school,
I like that story.
there was different poems, there was different things that you learned. And one of the things that has stuck with me for the rest of my life was the shorthand class. Now, I can't do shorthand now, but the first shorthand lesson we learned was a smile is like the summer sunshine. We have all heard the truth of that remark. A smile requires so little thought, yet it is our most valuable asset. And that has stuck with me through the years. And it's true. What you can do with a smile. And that was in the shorthand class. Of course, I couldn't read the shorthand, but I memorized that.
That's nice. I like that. Very nice. Okay. Eileen?
I really can't pick out one part of my life. I talked about summers going to New Hampshire. They were fun times.
Uh-huh.
I've talked about my father reading the funny pictures to me. I can think of many things. But I feel very fortunate in my life. If I died tomorrow, I would say I've done everything I wanted to do. It's been a good life. I had become a widow at 26, and then I met Poppy, and we were going to get married, and I gave my notice at work that I was going to leave. My boss said to me, he was a young man, he said, Eileen, why do you want to give up your job? And I said, just about the time that I was going to be able to do things with my husband, he passed away. And I feel as if I've been given a second chance, and I'm not going to blow it. And I don't feel I blew it. I feel Poppy and I have had a lot of good times. For being an only child, I've really expanded my family, and it's a good family. So I feel very blessed. And that is the best I can give you as far as memories. I've been blessed, and if I drop dead tomorrow, I just remember I said that. Don't feel sad.
All right. Thank you.